Hi guys, it's me, ChazzaHD, and welcome tonight to the preview for this weekend's 2021 Austrian Grand Prix. Of course, the second Grand Prix at the Red Bull Ring. And hopefully, overall, we get a better weekend than what we got last weekend. Now, last weekend's race wasn't bad. It wasn't a bad weekend, but it just didn't quite live up to the hype. You know, when you look back at that weekend, it didn't quite, as I said, live up to the hype and the expectation, I guess you could say, that we, I think, rightfully had. Given the past 3 or 4 years at the Red Bull Ring, we've had some pretty classic races, especially when it comes to fighting for the absolute, top positions, first, second, third. And yeah, the race last weekend just wasn't quite what we were hoping for. I mean, the midfield battle was decent. It wasn't great. It was decent, but again, it just wasn't quite what we were hoping for. And hopefully this weekend, we can get a good race at the Red Bull Ring. Well, of course, if the weather is any different this weekend than what we had last weekend, then you never know, could throw a double six in there. Just want to say, before I get started properly with this preview, though, hopefully you guys are doing well on what is a nice evening for me in the UK. And yeah, hopefully you are having the best day possible that you can possibly have, of course. But before we get into previewing the teams and how I think they'll do this weekend, and really this preview tonight is not going to be that long because, of course, we have already had a race at the Red Bull Ring, so we kind of already know how the teams are going to do this weekend based on performance if it is dry the whole weekend, just like it was in the first weekend. So we do already kind of know that this preview is going to be more so not just, how they'll do, but also based on what they did last weekend at the Red Bull Ring, how or where they need to improve for this weekend's race, of course, in the same country and circuit. So, again, it will be a slightly different preview in that aspect and probably a bit shorter as well. But before we get into the teams, let's first get into the top 10 in the Drivers' Championship and as well the Constructors' Championship standings. So, let me just get to it now. Max Verstappen is currently leading the Drivers' World Championship by 18 points from Lewis Hamilton in second. Sergio Perez is third. Lando Norris is fourth. Valtteri Bottas is in fifth position. And then after him is the two Ferraris of Leclerc and Sainz. Then Pierre Gasly, Daniel Ricciardo, and Sebastian Vettel. And then in the Constructors' Championship, Red Bull now lead by 40 points from Mercedes going into this weekend's race. Well, you have to say, as we'll get into in a moment, Mercedes are definitely still clearly on the back foot compared to Red Bull. McLaren still third, but Ferrari, of course, in the first race at the Red Bull Ring did gain, 4 points on McLaren that weekend, but McLaren still have a decent lead over Ferrari of 12 points. And then AlphaTauri are in fifth, but their lead in fifth has been cut down just to 2 points by Aston Martin, who of course had a good points finish with Lance Stroll in 8th place. Then Alpine are still in 7th, and they are just 15 points behind AlphaTauri in 5th, and then Alfa Romeo, of course, are down in 8th, and then you've got Williams and Haas 9th and 10th. So really, the drivers and constructor standings, if you look at them before the Styrian Grand Prix and after, in terms of position, they're exactly the same. The only difference is a few slight point swings here or there, but really it's the same points or championship standing-wise from, this time last week to now. So really, like I said, nothing has really changed that much. Of course, Max Verstappen having a slightly bigger lead in the championship does help. But again, 18 points, given that it's 25 for a win, 26 if you get the fastest lap. It's not that big of a lead at all, and it can easily be overhauled in just one race. So it's still a very small lead that Max Verstappen has. But getting to the teams at the front of the grid, starting off with Mercedes. Now, Lewis Hamilton today was talking about he's been in the simulator mode to try and work on closing the gap currently to Red Bull, because Red Bull clearly are the best team in Formula 1 at the current moment because they have won 4 races in a row. Max Verstappen really could have won almost all of the races so far this season. Sorry. Bahrain, he should have won. Imola, of course, he did win. Portugal, he could have won if he didn't make a mistake. Spain, he almost did win. If it wasn't for Lewis Hamilton's great strategy that he was on, then I think Verstappen would have won that race. And of course, Monaco, he won. Baku, he was going to win, but then had his tyre failure, and then he won, of course, last weekend in Austria and the week before in France. So Red Bull have clearly this season been, especially with Max Verstappen, the best, I guess, driver team package out there, and are the ones to beat so far this season. And like I said, Lewis Hamilton earlier today, in the press day that they do on a Thursday, of course, was going on about, we're doing more work in the simulator to try and find out, how to close the gap. And I think coming into this Grand Prix this weekend, unless the weather is drastically different, I just don't see how Mercedes are going to win this race this weekend unless Max Verstappen has a reliability issue or, gets punted off at turn 1 on the first lap on Sunday. I just don't see how Mercedes can beat Verstappen this weekend because Max is probably in the best form of his life. The momentum behind him and Red Bull is probably the biggest that any team other than Mercedes have had, say, since probably Sebastian Vettel and Red Bull back in 2013. And given the characteristics of the circuit, and again, we raced here a week ago, Max Verstappen, in qualifying, clear advantage over the rest, and then in the race, he dominated the Grand Prix and was easily quicker than Lewis Hamilton, especially in the second stint of the race. So I just don't see how Mercedes, again, unless Verstappen has a major problem or they get really, really lucky, I just don't see how Mercedes on pure pace can win this Grand Prix. I just don't see it at all. I mean, Nib, after the other Grand Prix, the Grand Prix a week ago, was saying to me after the stream finished that he believes Mercedes will probably be closer to Red Bull this weekend, which from Mercedes' point of view, you would hope, but I just don't see how they can in that, short space of time. Because, again, if the conditions are the same, I don't see what's going to stop Red Bull and Max Verstappen being just as quick, if not even quicker, now that their, confidence is maybe not sky high, but very close to that. I just don't see how Mercedes win. I will say, though, for Lewis Hamilton, I think he might be in a bit of trouble this weekend because, as we saw a week ago, Valtteri Bottas, despite him having a penalty that dropped him down to 5th for this starting grid for the race, Valtteri Bottas did out-qualify Lewis Hamilton. Now, in 2017, 2018, 2019, and one of the 2020 races here at the Red Bull Ring, and of course last weekend, those are the times that Max Verstappen, that Valtteri Bottas has out-qualified Lewis Hamilton. The only time Valtteri Bottas failed to out-qualify Hamilton was in the wet qualifying session about a year ago for what was the Styrian Grand Prix. If it's dry, then you would have to say, based on form, that Valtteri Bottas is likely to out-qualify Lewis Hamilton, in qualifying. If Bottas doesn't have a serious problem that means he has a grid penalty or have a serious problem in the race, Lewis Hamilton, there's a real possibility that he might not even be finishing second to Verstappen. Now, I know people will say, well, they can just move Bottas out of the way for Hamilton in the race if needs be, which, that absolutely could happen. But what if Valtteri Bottas in the race is clearly a few seconds ahead of Hamilton, then they can't really then move Hamilton ahead of him, especially if Sergio Perez is very close in contention with Hamilton and Bottas. So there's a real possibility this weekend, like I said, that not only will Hamilton lose yet again to Max Verstappen, but also that Lewis Hamilton will not even finish in second place and get, say, the most amount of points realistically, given the pace of the Red Bull and Verstappen that he can get, which would probably be 19 points like he got a week ago. He's probably going to be then heading for 15 or 16 points if Bottas continues his form, in the dry. So I think this is going to be a tough weekend for Lewis Hamilton. Again, going to have to be at his best. I thought he still drove pretty well last weekend, considering historically he's not been that great at the Red Bull Ring. So like I said, I thought he did pretty well considering his historical performances at the Red Bull Ring. But this weekend, if it goes in a similar way to last weekend and the weather is not drastically different, then like I said, I just don't see how Mercedes really get anywhere near this team, which of course is Red Bull and Max Verstappen as a driver. I just don't see how Red Bull and Verstappen don't win, because not only did Verstappen, after getting pole position, not only did Max Verstappen win the Grand Prix, he won it dominantly. And I know people will say, oh, well, the reason it was 35 seconds was because Hamilton pitted, which is true. But before Hamilton pitted, it was 17, 18 seconds on pure pace. Verstappen was pulling away from Hamilton so quickly in the second stint that Hamilton just did not stand a chance of staying with the Red Bull of Max Verstappen. And I just don't see, because of that utter domination from Verstappen, and because of how great Max has been in the races compared to what he's been like, say, in qualifying, I just don't see how Verstappen doesn't win. Just don't see it at all. So I'd have to say this weekend, like I said, unless there's a major problem or the weather is massively different, Max Verstappen is going to win this Grand Prix this weekend, as long as conditions are the same. It's basically a guarantee, again, unless there is a major issue for Max Verstappen. Red Bull will be hoping, though, that Sergio Perez this time can get on the podium, because really he should have got the podium last weekend, but just simply didn't have enough pace for long enough to pass Bottas at the end of the race, but also to pass him even before that second pit stop to try and get after Valtteri Bottas. So, yeah, I think definitely third place at least for Sergio Perez has got to be a target, and I think he definitely can do it because he was running in third place for quite a while in the race last weekend. But yeah, Red Bull without doubt are the clear favourites for this weekend, and Mercedes have a lot of work to do. For the Ferrari team, of course, they surprised massively last weekend. Nobody thought they would put in the performance in the race that they did. I don't even think Ferrari believed that what happened. I don't think they believed that was going to happen at all. I thought they even thought probably going to get overtaken and finish a bit lower down than how we started. But just like I said, the pace was incredible. Of course, they did benefit a lot from having fresher tyres towards the end of the Grand Prix, say in the second half of the Grand Prix especially. Again, they did benefit quite a lot from having fresher tyres. Charles Leclerc basically had fresher tyres than everyone else for the whole race, and that's why Leclerc was able to make so much progress up the field. And I will say, in terms of strategy, especially in the midfield, I think that will be something to look out for this weekend, is that because of how, as we've seen, really the whole season, and we've seen this a bit last season as well, it is so advantageous to go longer into the Grand Prix and then pit for, even if it's a hard compound tyre, to have that much more fresher tyre than your rivals is such a big advantage that I think, again, this weekend you're going to see a lot of the midfield teams trying to go as long into the race as they can and not try to pit too early, because if they do, then they're probably going to get passed later on, because as I said, pitting as late as you can seems to be, and given the current tyres we have in Formula 1, it really is proving to be, like I said, a big advantage for later in the race in terms of scoring points, because then you have fresher tyres, and even if you are on the hardest compound, it doesn't really matter It really matters, again, about how fresh the tyre is. And that's what Ferrari benefited from massively last weekend. And really, as long as they employ that strategy again, I think Ferrari will be fine in that aspect. And it might sound weird, but in a way, because, I mean, if you look at the people, except, say, Lando Norris, and of course Pierre Gasly, who, Gasly didn't really have a chance to show what his real pace was, because obviously he was out of the race after a single lap. The people, again, except for Lando Norris in that midfield that started on the soft compound tyre, ended up during the race falling back quite a bit compared to the people who then came into the points who were, clearly behind them on track. So in a way, it would actually be better for not just Ferrari, but any midfield team to start outside the top 10 and on the medium compound tyre, because, I mean, you can easily overtake around this track, as we saw last weekend, and also in plenty of other races here, but also because you can then go a lot longer into the Grand Prix if you, say, start on the medium and then pit a lot later on. It will be much better that way than if you start, say, 6th and 7th with both cars on the soft compound tyre, because later in the race you will start to get eaten up by those cars that have pitted a lot later than you, but have a lot fresher and possibly softer tyres on. So we'll watch out for that this weekend, because again, even if people start outside the top 10, doesn't mean really that they're in a bad position. Could actually mean they're in a better position than they would be if they started in the top 10. Now, for McLaren, of course, last weekend, Lando Norris was great. Of course, finishing in 5th place, another top 5 finish for the Brit, Lando Norris. The McLarens were, I think they had the quickest car in a straight line at the Red Bull Ring, and I think they'll probably go for the same wing setup that they had from last weekend. So they should be, again, very quick down the straight. So Lando Norris, especially in qualifying, should be very, very quick. And you never know, could be in the top 5 on the grid once again. For Daniel Ricciardo, I'm afraid for any Australian Daniel Ricciardo fans out there, or just Daniel Ricciardo fans in general from across the world, it's not going to really be any better this weekend because, I mean, I've said this before, Ricciardo historically is not great at this circuit, especially in qualifying trim. In the race, as long as he doesn't have a reliability issue like he had last weekend, then he should be able to finish in the points, because like I said, the McLaren in a straight line is very quick, and he should be able to get overtakes done, which I think he would have last weekend if he was given the chance to, with a car that was actually working properly for him. So I think Ricciardo will have a better race this weekend, and I still think McLaren, as long as there's no real problems, I think McLaren are probably going to be 3rd or 4th best team this weekend, and I think certainly in the race they'll probably be the most, or say, higher scoring midfield outfit from that pack of the grid. Now let's get into the rest of the teams. Aston Martin, next up, they had a good race last weekend, but I just feel as though it could have been better. And like I said in my review of the Grand Prix in Styria, or in Austria, but the Styrian Grand Prix, I feel as though it could have been better because the strategy that they employed with Sebastian Vettel was not the right one, because he started on the medium compound tyre, which was the right call, as we saw, because his pace was good in that first stint, but then he simply was pitted by Aston Martin too early, and that's why he fell back eventually, and that's why he didn't finish in the points, when really, I think if he had gone, say, 10 laps longer into the race and then pitted, I think Vettel probably would have finished in the points. Maybe not 8th or 7th place or anything, but say 9th or 10th. And I think that would have been representative, honestly, of the pace that Sebastian Vettel had in the Aston Martin. But they just didn't get that right. So that's really the only thing they've got to work on, Aston Martin, is just getting the strategy a lot more right in terms of any cars of theirs that are starting outside the top 10. They've got to make sure that they go deep enough into the race so that fresher tyre towards the end of the race actually means that they do have an advantage and it doesn't wear away, no pun intended, later in the race because they pitted too early on a compound of tyre where, they should be going a lot longer into the race than the people who started the race on a soft compound tyre. So just need to get that right to Aston Martin, and hopefully for Sebastian Vettel as well, he will qualify better, because I think in qualifying he could have certainly done better, because of course Lance Stroll started the race in 9th and Sebastian Vettel started in 14th. So no doubt Sebastian Vettel can do better than that, and hopefully he does. AlphaTauri, of course, this was the scene of Pierre Gasly coming into the entry of the pit lane last weekend, and it was such a shame that Pierre Gasly had that problem, because if he was not hit by Leclerc, I think Gasly definitely would have finished in the points, probably in the top 7, because his pace was very good. The AlphaTauri was very quick as well, as we saw with Yuki Tsunoda, who of course finished in the top 10 and in 10th position. So I think definitely AlphaTauri are still going to be very quick this weekend. As long as, like I said, Gasly or Tsunoda are not hit by any other cars and are not disturbed by anything, then they should be getting both cars into the points. I'm not sure exactly what it will be, because it does depend on, I think, the pace of the Ferraris and the McLarens, but it should be a double points finish, because I do think AlphaTauri have probably the 3rd, 4th, maybe at worst 5th best car for this Grand Prix circuit this weekend, as we saw really last week. For Alpine, I mean, you wouldn't think, and I still don't think they have that great of a car for this type of circuit compared to their, say, rivals, but you got to give credit to Fernando Alonso. He is doing a superb job. He really, really is. Because, to finish or to qualify in 9th place, start the race from 8th, and then finish in 9th place as well, considering, again, the Alpine was not as quick as the McLaren, or the AlphaTauri, or the Ferrari. I thought he did very well to be in that position. Very, very well. And I think he'll just continue that form. He's getting better now on his comeback with every single Grand Prix. And I don't see a reason why he won't put in a good performance yet again. I will, though, say Esteban Ocon has got to step up a lot this weekend, because I thought he performed quite poorly, I have to say, a week ago. His qualifying was really poor, and then his race performance wasn't bad, but it wasn't anything more than just bang average, really, in the race. So I want to see a lot more from Esteban Ocon, because we have actually seen in the past with Ocon at the Red Bull Ring, he has absolutely the capability of putting in some good performances here. I mean, 2018, I think he finished in 6th place in the Force India at the time, and then I think 2017 he finished 8th or 9th. So he can absolutely put in a good performance here. There's no doubt about that. It's just he needs to, I think, forget kind of that disappointment that Fernando Alonso is now back ahead of him in terms of the teammate battle, and just focus on himself, because I think maybe that's getting to him. Fernando now coming kind of back at him in that fight between the two teammates. But it should be Alonso. If there's going to be an Alpine in the top 10, it should be Fernando Alonso. For Alfa Romeo, let's just pray that Kimi Raikkonen, for the first time in what feels like forever, can actually have a good qualifying session. Because, of course, last weekend he went from 18th to P11 and was only 3 seconds away from a point. Given how quick he was, really, you look at this weekend's race, if he can get into Q2, then he should give himself a very good chance then of a point, given how quick he was last weekend. So we'll have to see how he does. But yeah, Kimi Raikkonen has got to, whether it's this weekend or just some point this season, he's got to step up his qualifying performances. Because it almost feels like not only is Kimi not performing well on a Saturday, but it almost feels like he's not really trying to reverse that, if you know what I mean. He's not really trying to correct that. He's just kind of like, well, I'm not as quick as Antonio in qualifying, let's just focus on the race. Which I think he shouldn't be doing that, because, like I said, if we can just get his qualifying and not just his position where he qualifies, but if he can on pace be a lot closer to Antonio than he has been, then he should be definitely doing better position-wise, from then on. Maybe it's only 1 or 2 positions, but it's better than, where he's been qualifying. I mean, at the moment, he's regularly getting knocked out in Q1, which is embarrassing for a world champion, a guy who really, if you look at his career and his career and the bad luck he had earlier in his career, really could have been a 2 or 3-time world champion, and now he's getting regularly knocked out in Q1. I know the Alfa Romeo car is not that quick, but you just expect more, really, with Kimi Raikkonen. And given that he's clearly showed in the race that his pace is there, he's got to start somehow figuring out a way of developing confidence over a single lap, because it just simply isn't happening at the moment for him at Alfa Romeo. And finally, for Williams, of course, Haas F1 are going to be at the back as always. For Williams, of course, this man on screen, Mr. Saturday, who had a very poor Sunday because, well, not because of himself, but because the car and the team let him down. Running in 8th place on the medium compound timing, I still can't really get over just how good he was in qualifying and the race. I know he is, if you look at his junior Formula days, he has been historically very good here. I think he qualified in P11 last year as well at the Red Bull Ring in the Williams, I think in the wet session. So again, I know he's been good here, but it's like, you know what I mean? That performance in the race was just so surprising. And it was such a shame that he had the reliability issue. But again, that's just, it seems the way his career is. Puts in great performances, but there's always a but, whether it's him making a mistake or the team he's driving for having a major issue at the absolute wrong time. It's such a shame, and I'm sure this weekend he'll be very quick again, but I'm not going to say he's going to finish in the points, and I don't think he will, because simply, this guy doesn't have the luck necessary to do that at all. I just don't believe he'll ever finish in the points for Williams whatsoever, so I'm afraid I don't think he'll do it. I think he'll be quick, but I don't see a points finish at all. And Latifi, hopefully he can put in a decent performance again like he did last weekend, where, again, I thought he did pretty well. I mean, he did finish down in 18th place, I get that, but he did actually get, unfortunately, hit by Pierre Gasly when Gasly had his tyre failure, which is why Latifi had his puncture and fell down behind the field massively. And he out-qualified, I think, Kimi Raikkonen and Esteban Ocon in qualifying. So I thought he did pretty well, Latifi. Just hopefully a bit more luck this time. And as I said, Haas F1 will be at the very back. Now, before I come to the end of this video, let me just read out a few comments from you guys in the live chat. Let me read some comments here that I can find. By the way, hello to Aline and Tonka and Seirugara and Mike. Those are all of you in the chat. McLaren One Race says, I think Red Bull win the mind games this year. Merck are Germanic and methodical. Red Bull are looking outside of the box mind game wise. I'm a Lewis fan and admit this. I don't really agree with that, to be honest. I think Mercedes still have an advantage mentally over Red Bull. I mean, Red Bull, yes, they've been there and done that before, and that's a big reason why their title challenge, say, compared to the Ferrari one in 2017 and 2018, the reason Red Bull's one is a lot stronger is because there's a lot more people within the Red Bull team who have been there and done that before, not just in Formula One, but with the actual team itself. But they haven't done it for a while. Again, 8 years ago was the last time Red Bull were even in contention for a world championship, and of course that was back when they were dominating Formula One itself. Since then, Mercedes have been the dominant ones, and still, I think Mercedes do hold the mental edge over Red Bull, because they know, Mercedes, that they have, I mean, and they do, Mercedes have the best team in Formula One still, in terms of pure talent, not just in the drivers, but, you know, engineers, mechanics. Like I said, they have the best team in Formula One, and they know that, and I think everyone else knows that. And as long as they, at the moment where they're losing a bit to Red Bull, and let's say Mercedes, and by the way, they have said Mercedes, I think James Allison said this, they are going to now bring some upgrades to this year's car to try and get back at Red Bull. If Mercedes do, say in a few races' time, jump back ahead of Red Bull and have the best car, and Hamilton can then claw his way back in the championship and win it, then these races where Mercedes, like I said, are behind Red Bull at the moment will be key for Mercedes to not lose, now that they're, you know, behind, to not lose a load of points. Say like they did in Monaco or Baku. They don't want to be losing too many points to Verstappen. If Verstappen's going to win, then Mercedes still have to get the absolute best result they can and keep that pressure on. Because you never know, later in the season, I mean, Verstappen is doing well right now and driving well, the Red Bull team is going well, but later in the season, trust me, if it's 10 to 15 points, the lead that Verstappen has over Hamilton, and there's like 4 or 5 races to go, trust me, the pressure on Verstappen will double, if not triple, by then, and it will be intriguing to see whether Max Verstappen responds to it well, and whether possibly he cracks under pressure, because like we said, he's never been in a championship battle before. This is completely new to him. Of course, winning races and getting pole positions, not really new to him. Maybe on a consistent basis it is new to him, but he has done it before. But again, fighting for a world championship, it's something he's never done. And like I said, the pressure, once we get into the final 2 to 3 months of the season, will be at least double what it is now. So we'll see how he responds. He might be driving well at the moment, but we'll see if that continues itself later in the season when, again, the pressure really ramps up. We've seen this before with, you know, other drivers where in a title fight, they drive really well in the first half of the season where there's not as much pressure, but when it gets down to the real nitty-gritty of the season, which is really, say, just after the end of the European season, and then, you know, from then towards the end of the season, that's the real nitty-gritty part of the season, you then see, say, people who have fallen by the wayside just crack a bit under that pressure. So we'll see, like I said, if Max Verstappen can respond to that well. And really, if you look at the grid, I was just thinking then, in terms of, you know, Verstappen has never competed for the World Championship before. There's not actually that many drivers on the grid who have. You know, you've got Lewis Hamilton, of course, Sebastian Vettel, Fernando Alonso, and Kimi Raikkonen. And then after that, I don't think there's been anyone else. So there's not actually on the grid that much experience of a championship battle. I mean, I'm not going to have anyone saying, oh, well, Valtteri Bottas, because those were not title fights in 2019 or 2020, let's be honest. So really, anyone Lewis Hamilton comes up against, unless it is, surprisingly, because of the cars they're in, Alonso or Vettel or Raikkonen, Hamilton will always have a massive advantage in terms of he has been here, he has done it before, he knows exactly, you know, how to respond to this pressure. And again, Max Verstappen does not. Let me read, I think, one final comment or so, and then we'll get into the end of this stream. Let me just see if there's any good comments that I could find. Just trying to find one good one quickly. Manj Share says, can we talk about the failure of Daniel Ricciardo? Well, I think it's like Nib said last Sunday, people saying Daniel Ricciardo's washed up. Online, complete rubbish, absolute rubbish. Daniel Ricciardo, as we've seen in the past, in his first year in the team, isn't as great as he goes on to be at that certain team. Look at his first year in Toro Rosso, for example. Wasn't anywhere near as good as his second year. Same with Renault. His first year wasn't that great. His second year was probably the best it could have been. Of course, Red Bull was different, but I think that was an anomaly, honestly. And also the Red Bull car, aerodynamically speaking, was a lot stronger compared to the rest of the grid than the Renault or Toro Rosso, respectively. And yeah, if you look at this season for Ricciardo, it's not been anywhere near as bad as I think people think. So Bahrain, let's remember, he outqualified Lando Norris and finished in, I think, 7th place, which is not a great race, but still good. Still good, considering who, the top 4, for example, is going to be Hamilton, Verstappen, Bottas, Perez. So after that, Ricciardo's aim has got to be at least finishing in 8th place, given the pace of the cars this season and the respective championship battle. So, first race in Bahrain, good. Imola, not as good, but still good. I mean, he finished the race in, 6th place. I thought he drove, honestly, the best he could, considering very tricky weekend. Of course, wet, dry race. And even though he got the podium at Imola in 2020, again, he does take time to get used to the car, and he has, by his own admission, not gotten as used to the car as he was hoping, earlier in the season. Now, Portugal, yes, he qualified poorly, and yes, he did come through and get a point, but as we saw in 2020 when he was in the Renault, he also had a poor weekend there, so it's not really a surprise. He just isn't really that great around that circuit. Spanish Grand Prix, outqualified and outraced Norris. Great weekend. Monaco was probably the first weekend of the season where I thought Ricciardo did perform poorly. Yes, the McLaren car wasn't, top 2 on the grid or anything that weekend. I get that. But I just thought, especially in qualifying, I just thought he could have done a bit better than what he did, which was, I think, 13th on the grid. Considering how great he's been in Monaco in the past, I mean, even in his first year at Renault, he qualified, I think, 6th on the grid. So I just thought he could have done a lot better than what he did. And it was, I think, quite a poor performance by his standard around that circuit. So I'll give you that. That was not a great performance at all. Baku, I thought he drove well in the race, but let himself down with his qualifying effort. So yeah, poor in qualifying, but in the race, I thought he did well. France, I thought he did the best he could. I mean, he was out-qualified by Norris, yes, but in the race, drove very well and finished in the top 6. And then, yeah, last weekend, qualifying was poor. The reason the race result was poor was because of the car, really, not because of him, because he had, a couple reliability issues during the race. He couldn't really do anything about it. And also, if you look at, again, his history around the Red Bull Ring in terms of pure pace, Daniel Ricciardo's, one of his weakest circuits is the Red Bull Ring, without doubt. So, again, it's not really a surprise that Ricciardo last weekend and even this weekend, it's not going to really be that big of a surprise if Daniel Ricciardo again does not get into the top 10. So again, it's not really that big of a deal in terms of, is Ricciardo performing too poorly? And then yeah, when we get to Silverstone, I think Ricciardo definitely will perform better at Silverstone because historically he's been better there. And I think it's more, say, of a driver's circuit where the driver has more input on whether they do well or not around a circuit like Silverstone rather than the Red Bull Ring. So I don't think Ricciardo's performed as poorly as people think. I mean, he's still in the, he's what, 9th in the Drivers' Championship. Yeah, it's nowhere near as good as his teammate, but he's still 9th in the Drivers' Championship and is still finished, in the top 6 twice. Had some good qualifyings in there. Again, Bahrain, Imola, Spain, France, his qualifying was decent and his race was pretty good. So again, I think people are overrating how, say, disappointing he has been. Yes, he's been disappointing compared to 2020, but it doesn't mean he's been bad. So yeah, I think people need to stop overreacting when it comes to Daniel Ricciardo. And really, just give him a bit of a break. Because again, he's not been anywhere near as bad as people think or claim. And as usual, something that the F1 community does tend to do a lot, not you guys necessarily, I'm just talking about, say, people on Twitter, which are sometimes, some people on Twitter can be the worst. They tend to exaggerate really everything. So if someone's not performing as well as maybe they hoped, then, they're washed up, they're shit, they're this, that, and the other. But if they're performing well, then they're, should be in a Mercedes and winning the World Championship. So best not to listen to those type of people, really, who just, like I said, tend to exaggerate everything. But I think, guys, I've talked for long enough, and I think I'm going to come to the end of this stream. Thank you guys for coming along to this. I just want to update you guys as to the schedule for this weekend. So it is the exact same as last weekend. So I will be live on Saturday morning at 10:45 a.m. UK time for the Practice 3 watch-along for the Austrian Grand Prix, then live again at 1:30 p.m. UK time for the qualifying watch-along again for the Austrian Grand Prix. And then on Sunday, of course, there's 3 streams. At 11 a.m. UK time, I'll be live for the race preview. Then it'll be live with Nib at 1:30 p.m. UK time for the race watch-along. And then on Sunday night, I'll be live again at 7 p.m. UK time to review the events of the 2021 Austrian Grand Prix. So don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notifications bell for that content coming up this weekend as well. Don't forget to smash the like button and share this video and channel everywhere you can. And don't forget as well to join our Discord server, link below in the description. Best place that is for notifications, my videos and streams, and also quite an active server with quite a lot of people in there as well. So if you do want to join it, then make sure to do so. And as well, make sure to comment down below what you think is going to happen for this weekend's 2021 Austrian Grand Prix. But guys, until this weekend's race and until my coverage of it, it has been me, Chazza HD. Goodbye.